Hey there, friends. It's Laurie. Happy holidays. Today I'm sharing some quick and easy last-minute Christmas and winter DIYs. I made a Dollar Tree star snowman, a Believe in Christmas button tree, a Let It Snow wooden wreath, and a pretty Merry Christmas centerpiece. As always, I hope you have fun crafting with me, so let's get busy. To make my snowman, I'm starting with a 12-inch wooden star from the Dollar Tree, and mine has a small imperfection on one corner, so this is a great way to hide it. I removed the hanger, and now I'm using some white acrylic paint and giving it a coat. I'm covering the star with some duster refills. I found these at the Dollar Tree. They come 3 to a pack, but I'll only be using 5. They each have a small tab on one end, so I used my scissors and clipped it off. I'm adding hot glue onto one side of the star and then attaching one of the dusters. I followed the exact same instructions, added hot glue to the remaining 4 points, and then placed down a duster. I'm removing the excess duster, and I'm turning the ends into a point. I'm adding a hat onto my snowman, and I'm using a black fleece woman's sock. This came from the Dollar Tree. I'm making sure the heel is in the back, and then I'm cuffing up the end of the sock 2 times. I'm adding a little hot glue under the front and the back cuff to help hold it in place. I'm now adding it onto the snowman's head by simply pulling it about halfway down on the point. I then added hot glue in the front and the back to attach it. For the snowman's eyes, you can use small buttons or pretty much anything you'd like. I'm using 2 small wooden circles, and this pack came from Michael's. I painted both with some black acrylic paint. Then to finish the eyes, I placed a dot of white on each. I added 2 dots of hot glue just under the snowman's hat and placed down the 2 wooden eyes. For the snowman's nose, I'm using one from an assorted pack of carrot noses, and this I found on Temu. You can always use a large skewer. I found these at the Dollar Tree. You snip off the pointy end and paint it orange. I'm adding a carrot nose from the Temu pack, and I'm attaching it to the snowman with some hot glue. I want to give my snowman a scarf, so I'm using some of the Dollar Tree's blue and white gingham ribbon. I added a piece long enough to wrap around his neck and then tied it in half only once. I then used my glue gun to hold the fold in place. I then added some hot glue under the ribbon on the back. For the top of the hat, I'm just gathering a little bit of it together and then tying it off with the matching ribbon. I'm using 3 sparkly silver snowflakes that I pulled off of this Dollar Tree tinsel tree. I added some E6000 onto the back and then attached it to his hat. I added some blush onto the end of a cotton swab and then gave my snowman some rosy cheeks. I'm adding on the word snow, and I'm using some wooden letters from this pack that I found at Michael's. I painted mine with some navy blue acrylic paint. I'm attaching each of the letters onto a 4-inch sparkly snowflake, and I did pick these up at the Dollar Tree. I added E6000 onto the back of each of the wooden letters and then attached them in the center of the snowflake. I'm using the end of a small paintbrush, dipping it into white acrylic paint and making dots on the letters. By doing this, it gives the effect of tiny snowflakes. I'm adding the snowflakes onto my snowman by adding some E6000 onto the back. I'm now using those last two silver snowflakes and adding one onto each of his feet. To finish up, I used my E6000 and attached a white ribbon hanger onto the back. Now that I'm done, this cute little snowman is ready for winter. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below. I wish you all a safe and happy holiday season. To all my returning friends, I am always so happy to see you, and I can't wait to chat with everyone down below in the comments. Getting started, I'm recycling a board. I actually found a few of these on the side of the road, and I think they were from a wedding long ago. It measures 8 by 10, and I'm giving it a coat on the front of white acrylic paint. I let it dry completely, and now I'm using a piece of heavy grit sandpaper, and I'm sanding around the edges and then just random spots on the top of the board. I'm adding on a wooden believe sign from the Dollar Tree, and I'm painting it with some red acrylic paint. I added E6000 onto the back and then attached it to the top of my sign. I'm adding on a Christmas tree, and I'm using assorted buttons. I found this pack on Temu. You can use any buttons you have on hand, and if you don't have the right colors, you can always paint them. I'm using my E6000 and attaching random buttons in the shape of a tree. I kept adding on the E6000 and attaching the buttons, and the bottom layer won't matter as much because we'll be placing another layer on top of it and you really won't see them. I now have the shape of my tree, so I'm continuing on adding E6000 and stacking on the holiday buttons. You can always leave the tree a single layer, but I really liked the 3D effect it gave when I stacked on more of the buttons. For the top, I'm using a wooden star from this Dollar Tree pack, and I painted mine gold. I used my E6000 and attached it over the top button. I'm using some brown acrylic paint, and I'm painting a small trunk on the bottom of my tree. For the hanger, I'm using 18 inches of nautical rope, and mine came from the Dollar Tree. I attached the two ends onto the back with my E6000. To finish up, I'm using a 2-inch red sheer wired ribbon. I made a simple bow with two 5-inch tails and two 3-inch loops. I then cut the two tails off at an angle. I then used some hot glue and attached it to my sign. I love the way it looks, and it makes such a unique piece of Christmas decor. To make my Let It Snow wreath, I'm starting with a 14-inch wire wreath form from the Dollar Tree, and I'm removing the center ring. I'm placing that to the side, and now I'm using 7-inch wooden cutout trees. There's 10 of them in a package, and they came from Temu. I'm painting all 10 with my forest green acrylic paint, and I did give the back of each a light coat. Before I permanently attach them, I'm first finding their placement on the form. I'm slightly tucking one edge of the tree under the one before it. I kept moving them a little bit here and there until they were all evenly spaced. Happy with their placement, I'm now using my E6000 and attaching each of them to the form. After I've attached them to the form, I'm then using some painter's tape to help hold them in place. One of the reasons that I like using the E6000 is it doesn't set up that quickly, so it does give you an opportunity to move the trees around. Now that I have all the trees attached, I just found some heavyweight items in my home. To hold them in place, I did let the glue set up overnight. I removed the tape, and all of the trees are securely attached to the form. I'm dipping the end of my paintbrush into some white acrylic paint and then making random dots on the trees. I like doing this because to me it gives the effect of snowflakes on the trees, but you can always change up the colors, and that way it would look like there were ornaments on the trees. I made sure that the white dots were dry, and now I'm adding on a coat of matte Mod Podge. I'm setting that aside to let it dry, and now I'm going to paint my snowmen. I'm using 2 packages of the wooden 3-inch snowmen from the Dollar Tree. I only need 2 from the second package, so I have a total of 10. I'm giving each one a coat of white acrylic paint. You can paint your snowman's hat any color you'd like. I'm painting mine with some black acrylic paint. I'm giving each of them an eye. I'm just dipping the end of my paintbrush into the black paint and then adding a dot onto each. I'm now giving each of their carrot noses a coat of orange acrylic paint. I'm making a scarf for each of the snowmen, and I just used some fabric that I had on hand. I cut it thin and at about 8 inches in length. This part was super easy. I just tied the fabric into a knot around their necks. I then used my scissors and trimmed up the ends on each of the scarves. There's a little hanger hole on the top of each, and I'm going to hide them by using some crystals that I already had on hand. I added E6000 onto each hat and then covered the holes with the crystals. To attach the snowmen, I'm adding E6000 onto the back and then centering each one between the trees. Adding a sign to your wreath, it's completely optional. I had this Let It Snow sign that I picked up a while back at the Dollar Tree, so I'm going to add this to my wreath. I removed the hanger, turned my wreath over, and now I'm finding the placement of the sign. I used my E6000 and attached it in place. I placed down a couple of heavy bottles until it's set up. To finish up, I'm adding on 10 foam stars from this pack I found at Michael's. I decided to paint mine with some gray acrylic paint. I want to give my wreath just a hint of sparkle, so I'm painting each of the stars with a silver twinkles accent. I once again used my E6000 and attached a star on the top of each tree. And now that I'm done, my Let It Snow wreath is ready to hang. Getting started, I'm using 28 tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree. I'm using my E6000, attaching the blocks together into 4 sets of 7. I then attached all 4 pieces together. To make sure that none of the glue snuck between the blocks, I used some heavy grit sandpaper and I gave it a quick sanding. This is the base for my centerpiece, and I'm giving it a coat of golden brown acrylic paint. I'm using 4 more of the brown tumbling tower blocks, adding on some E6000 and making feet for the base. With the base for my centerpiece complete, I'm now making the base for the birdhouse. I'm using one of the wooden crates from the Dollar Tree and I'm painting it with white acrylic paint. For the banner on my centerpiece, I'm using one of the Dollar Tree's Merry Christmas wooden words. I gave mine a light coat of this pretty sage green acrylic paint. I let it dry and then attached it to the front of the crate. I used my E6000 once again and centered the crate onto the base. I'm using one of the Dollar Tree wooden birdhouses and I painted mine with yellow acrylic paint. I'm making a roof for my birdhouse and I'm using some clothespins that came from the Dollar Tree. I'm using 8 of them. I pulled them apart, so now I have 16 pieces. 2 of them I won't be attaching together because I'll be adding them onto the front of the birdhouse. I'm using my E6000 and attaching the clothespins together, making 2 sets of 7 pieces. You can always use hot glue, you just need to be careful that it doesn't sneak out in between the clothespins. I gave the glue a chance to set up for a couple of hours, and now I'm painting both pieces along with the 2 front pieces of the roof with the same golden brown acrylic paint. As I'm painting them, I am painting underneath the flat ends of the roof as well as the 2 pieces that will overhang. They're now dry and I'm attaching the 2 roof pieces onto the birdhouse using E6000. I placed down my first piece, making sure it was even with the roof's peak. I used some painter's tape to help hold it in place, and then I followed the same instructions for the other side. Everything is dry and I removed the tape, and now I'm attaching my last 2 pieces. Once again, I'm using E6000, attaching the 2 pieces with the flat ends on the top. To keep them even, I'm slightly overlapping one. I'm making a small wreath for my birdhouse, and I'm using a leftover piece of this Dollar Tree garland. I used the bird's entrance to decide how large I wanted it to be, and then I wrapped it around itself just a little bit and cut off the extra. From there, I then used my scissors and gave it a haircut until it resembled a wreath. I made sure it was a good fit, and then I attached it with hot glue. You can always leave it natural or add on a little bow. I'm using some Mardi Gras beads because they make perfect ornaments. I'm using the classic red, green, and gold, and I'm cutting them into individual beads. I placed some dots of hot glue around the wreath and attached the ornaments. I added some E6000 to the bottom of my birdhouse and attached it to the Merry Christmas base. I'm using a Dollar Tree decorative pick. It has a pine cone, some greenery, and a little red bird. I removed the clip on the back and then attached it to the side of my birdhouse. I'm using 2 small pine cones that I had on hand, and I'm attaching them to the centerpiece. I'm using some white acrylic paint to mimic the pine cone that's already attached and giving them a hint of snow. To finish up, I'm using 3 pieces of some Dollar Tree greenery that I had left over, and I'm hot gluing it to both sides. Now that I'm done, I think this makes the sweetest Merry Christmas centerpiece. Here we are at the end of the video, and I really hope you had fun making these Christmas and winter DIYs with me. If you're new to my channel and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. I hope you all have the happiest of holidays. Stay safe, and until next time, bye everybody.